Hello, listeners. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Malissa Clark, who is the author of the book Never Not Working: Why the Always On Culture is Bad for Business and How to Fix It. Clark is passionate about bridging the scientist practitioner gap and advocating for healthier workplaces and worker well being through her speaking and her consulting. She is also an associate professor of industrial and organizational psychology at the University of Georgia and serves as the associate head of the Department of Psychology and director of the Healthy Work Lab. She is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on the topics of workaholism, overwork, burnout, and employee well-being. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Welcome to the Live for Yourself Revolution, where our mission is to highlight stories of intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs who are truly living for themselves. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, leadership and career coach focused on guiding you toward a career and life you can love. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoy the show. So, Dr. Malissa Clark, I am very excited to have you on the show, and we were just sharing some stories about kind of this overwork mentality and how some people just don't really believe that there's any other way to work than, and I'm just going to put a box on this, maybe overworking, like responding at night to work, feeling a sense of anxiety and stress and dread about work. It's just the way it is. And is is that really, is that the truth? Because I'm a little sad right now hearing that.
Yeah, that makes me a little sad too. I do think there is a subset of the population who truly believes that at the bottom of their heart. I'm not one of those people. Maybe I was in my younger years, thought that that was the route to success, but I definitely am convinced now, not just based on my personal experiences, but through interviews I've conducted with individuals that struggle with overwork and workaholism, industry leaders, and my peer reviewed research, that it is entirely detrimental to have work consume your life in this way. It feels like that's the route to success. It feels like that's what everyone else is doing. And in some industries, that may be to some extent accurate, but the research is really clear on this, that it's negative for not just your own health and well being, for your family, for your friends and loved ones, and for your company, either your employer or if you're self employed, for your own business. And I know people don't like to look at the facts that contradict their hunches and their gut feelings, but the facts are what they are. And so I'm hoping with elevating this through conversations like with you, people can start to be more open to, does it really have to be like this? Do I really need to be connected 24/7? Will my business survive if I'm not? And I believe the answer is yes, it will.
Hey, you've been featured in a lot of very major news outlets. Management Today, Financial Times. Your book was selected to be like one of the top uh, people manage people management books. Your book was selected to be, it was a top idea book by Adam Grant. Like there are, this is not a little subset, a little kind of small piece of the pie. This is kind of, it sounds like it's the news of the hour. It's a headline. And the research also promotes that this is not just a headline, it's the truth. So where do you think some of the dissenters are coming from where they're just like, no, it's not possible to, and I guess maybe put some context around this. It's not possible not to overwork or not to feel like it's not possible to feel like I need to work all the time. It's not possible to not respond to that email at night and not be fired. Where's that coming from?
Again, I do think that there are some pretty toxic environments, and it's not just certain industries, although you could probably imagine some of them might be worse than others. But I do think that some people are in a situation where because of their boss, because of their work team, because of the organizational culture that they are in, if everyone else is buying into this or, answering emails 24/7, then you do feel that pressure, and it's a real pressure to also be checking your email 24/7 to respond to those messages because you don't want to be left out. We all know that feeling, I'm sure, that we've experienced where we turn off our email for the night, then all of a sudden there's a flurry of emails and there's a whole conversation that happened that you are missing. And then you don't have any say in that decision making. And so for a lot of people, they might feel like, well, it has to be like this because in their particular work group or with their particular boss, if I'm being honest, like maybe it is like that. But there are examples of work teams and companies within one of those really hard driving industries like management consulting or finance that even though the whole company might have this always on mentality, there's pockets of teams that are doing it differently and are just as successful. So, I guess what I'm saying is it might feel like you have to always be on, and you might be in a situation where actually you might. But does that mean you have to stay in that situation? Does that mean you can't look for another route, whether it's a lateral transfer in your organization or maybe switching organizations? Because I will tell you, there are examples in every single industry. You name an industry, I'll give you a counterexample. Um, I will find one that they're doing it differently. And so you and I were talking a little bit before the interview about the cycle of responsiveness, and that's a real thing. And there's a great book by Leslie Perlow, and she talks about it's called "Sleeping with Your Smartphone." Really catchy title. I love that. But it's true, though. You don't want to get left behind, and I think that is part of the problem. Researchers call it the autonomy paradox because technology is supposed to make us more productive so that we can, have more autonomy on when and where we work. But the problem is now we're tethered to our work through technology. And so it's actually harmful to us.
Mhm. I would 100% agree to that. I can tell from myself, my own experience of the day, like, if I'm connected, if I'm in my inbox, if I'm on my phone, then I feel more anxiety. I feel like I
Mhm.
have to respond. If I'm in a meeting and a new email comes in, it's like, "Oh, I can't." I've all of a sudden now I'm distracted.
Yep.
And and so I've been in these work environments though where everyone was running around with their head cut off, and they'd schedule a meeting, let's say at like 7 o'clock at night,
Mhm.
and I'd be like, "Can't come," and I wouldn't go. Or I'd be double booked and I'd say, "Sorry, schedule it for next week." Or I'd have a hold and someone would try scheduling some time then. I said, "No, that's my thinking time."
Mhm. I love
And
that.
I wouldn't check my email at night, and I wouldn't have, Teams on my phone, and I kept my job. And I thought I was seen as a high performer. And so
And you
I
probably were. That's the thing because
mhm,
having the downtime, that rest and recovery actually helps with performance. The research is so clear
yeah.
on that.
So there are these so I 100% agree there are some toxic work environments, but I would love to say, like, "Look, if you weren't afraid to lose your job, let's just try some stuff out." The problem is, when it comes to work, there's always that, "Well, what if I lose my job?" That I think prevents sometimes actions from happening to maybe build a more positive work environment. What have
Yeah.
you found, or what does the research say that gets in the way of people maybe living a little bit more for themselves, creating some more positive boundaries for themselves when it comes to work?
I think some people just internally have a harder time doing that. I'm one of those people. I have to work really hard to practice what I preach. And that's part of it. And I do think, some other barriers we've already talked about, if that's kind of how the communication norms in your company are, it makes it harder to detach. And yeah, like you said, there might be this fear of losing your job or being perceived as a poor performer. So it's multifaceted, and I'll go one step broader and talk about just society and societal, pressure of being the quote unquote ideal worker. We have this image in our mind of, well, the ideal worker, the one who's going to, be the best performer is the one who prioritizes work over everything else. And, I was really struck by a conversation I had the other day. A leader had said, I just feel like I'm giving everything I have to my work, that when I come home, it's like I have no mental or physical energy. I'm just completely drained. And it's unfortunate because the most important thing to me is my family. And they're basically getting scraps of, my energy. And it just struck me as it's so sad. Like, why are we doing this? What is the point? I really, really value my family, time with my kids. They're both in high school now, so I have precious little time, right? My daughter's going to be a senior. And so I'm really trying to actively prioritize and set those boundaries. And again, it can be really hard if the organization or the leader constantly is violating those boundaries, but all you can do is set clear boundaries with communicating, here's what I am and am not available. And you know, if it's an environment where you're communicating those things and your boss and your team are just they don't care, then I do think you have to reflect and say what's really important to me, what is aligned with my values. I don't want to look back on my deathbed and be like, I wish I wouldn't have spent all this time working. I want to be happy with the decisions that I make. So I know it takes a lot of courage, but um, I just encourage people to think about what really do they want in their lives, their entire lives that would make them fulfilled and happy.
And I remember reading from your book, kind of that awareness and that visualization is almost that first step to say, what type of life do you want?
Mhm.
And how are you living? Like, if you look back 20 years from now and you're working the same way, is that a good life?
Yeah.
And
A lot of
and I
people
have a
fool
client right now.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I have a client right now who literally has a severe health issue due to work. And I've had other clients in the past that have severe health issues, like on their deathbed due to work. And it's not a joke when we say stress can kill you. And if we're constantly living in this tornado or whirlwind, we don't feel safe and we feel that we can't be ourselves at work, then we're in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, every single person I interviewed for my book that was struggling with workaholism or working toward recovery, I'm not kidding. Every single one of them had some sort of health concern. Either, some had multiple heart attacks, but there were, a whole host of um, health issues that everyone had across the board. Like you said, stress is so detrimental and it can affect us in so many different ways. Um, and you can only fool yourself for so long. There are a couple people that they would have continued working to the level that they were had they not had a debilitating illness that forced them to be bedridden. And at that point, they really had to reflect. And some of them it was really difficult. They were literally questioning what's my point here in the world if I can't work? How am I worthy? And luckily, the people I've talked to, they've really come full circle. Some of them, that had these really tragic stories, and so I guess that goes to say that change can and does happen, but there's a lot of denial.
How did you get involved in this type of industry or on this topic?
That's a great question. I do have that kind of personality where it is difficult for me to not be going all the time. And this goes back to even childhood. I can remember always involved in all the clubs, especially high school that ramped up big time. Not only did I have above a 4.0, I was in multiple sports, tons of clubs. I was on the school board, student council. I was a big sister with big brothers, big sisters. I had two jobs, and then it just continued on through college and into my uh, work career before I went into academia. And so I've just really kind of struggled with this personally. And then when I got into academia, I realized that this had a name, and researchers have studied it under the term workaholism, work addiction. And I really resonated with that. And so I've been studying it ever since graduate school. So writing the book was really such a great experience for me because I could combine the research that I had been doing over the last 15 years with personal stories. And so I interviewed, dozens and dozens of people from Workaholics Anonymous, over 50 spouses of workaholics, and then many industry leaders, some of them really big ones, that I just got so many great stories and perspectives. And it really was clear to me that this is still such a huge problem, even as I think organizations are at least saying they're paying more attention to employee well being and mental health. Even in this period where I feel like there's some progress, I still feel like there's an enormous amount of uh, individuals that think it still needs to be this way. It still needs to be, let's work 24/7, and that's the only route to success. And as your example showed, when you said, you were still a good performer, it's absolutely true. There's research showing that managers can't even tell the difference if I'm being honest. Someone that actually works 80 hours a week and someone who works 40 and pretends to work 80, there's data showing that managers cannot tell the difference. And so we're kind of tricking ourselves to believe that we need to put in those 80-hour work weeks to be producing more, or the best employee, whatever that means. I'd like to think the best employee is someone who knows how to work efficiently and has a well-rounded life, has interests outside of work, because we know that actually impacts all the ideas we bring into work with creativity and innovation. To me, those are the workers that are the ideal workers. That's what we should aspire to, not the one who is the first in and last out. We're still stuck in that for whatever reason, even though we have all the technology and the tools to make it so we actually don't need to work so many hours per week.
Absolutely, like, very much drawn to this topic because I was this, like, underutilized, but kinda overworking, but kinda workaholic, but not for my main job, but for, like, 6 jobs,
Yeah, I can
and,
resonate
uh
with that. Yeah.
and the I remember, like, listening to that speech, maybe you know who says it, but it's like, "Oh, with the rate of productivity increasing, we should never have to work in the future. Like, we're gonna work 2 hours a week, and because we have all these tools," and the problem is our gauge of what is productive is increased dramatically, and I know too many leaders that don't set expectations for their employees, or the employees don't know how to set expectations for themselves. And so work never is finished. That's just the definition. There's always going to be work to do. So if we don't have those boundaries and we're just going to keep working, what have you found that works for you in creating that kind of positive work environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many different things that uh, could be helpful. What I've personally done with my work team, which so in academia, that's my graduate students and the undergraduates in my lab, but I'm speaking mainly to the about the graduate students because there is this idea that grad students work 24/7 and a lot of them do. And so as a leader, I think it's very important to model those behaviors. So when I do take vacation, leading up to that vacation, I make it very clear that I'm going to stop checking emails and I will not respond between this date and this date. And I will hold to that. Um, and unless there's like a true emergency, which there rarely is a true emergency. So setting those boundaries, role modeling, and changing the communication patterns, I think, is really important. We all have all these tools that ping us right away, whether it's Slack or Teams or whatnot. And that can really spiral out of control, as we talked about. And so, in my work team, I'll set hours where it's very clear that there's not going to be a conversation you're going to be missing out on because we don't do that between, the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., and so I think that helps. And so those are some of the main things, but I think, with conversations with people in industry, I think just trying to spread the word about like different kinds of ways we can detach from work. And it's not always about just unplugging, although that's pretty important to not be checking your phone 24/7 and maybe take an email off your phone, that kind of thing. But other things that people don't think about, for example, because I have a hard time detaching and I like to always be doing something, I really have a hard time with meditation and just sitting and relaxing. I'm trying to work on it, but it's just not easy for me because I feel like I'm wasting time. It's like I need to be doing something. So I engage in what's called a mastery experience. So Sabine Sonnentag, she's a big recovery researcher, and she has some great studies, and people have replicated this over and over that if you engage in a mastery experience when you're not working, and this is anything that challenges you that is not work related, be learning a new language or new instrument or honing your baking skills or whatever it is that takes your focus and takes it away from work. So you're psychologically detaching, but you're also still moving, you're still doing something if that's what's important to you. And that has been shown to lead to more engagement the next day, better sleep that night, and so lots of positive outcomes, and it's even more effective for people that are high in work engagement, high in workaholism. So that's one strategy, for example, that I think just sharing how um, impactful that can be, and it's not a really huge change, right? It's kind of adding something to your plate, but it's something that's actually really good for us. Or thinking about those things that maybe we're already doing in this new light. Like, actually, it is okay that I'm going to be at the tennis courts for an hour and a half practicing my tennis because this is my master experience. This is what is helping me be a better worker and a better person. And health wise, it's helping too. So those are some of the things that I can think of that are helpful, not just with my team, but also like just broadly for myself.
Mhm. I love all of those, and I imagine we have some people that are listening, though, that say, "This isn't gonna work for me." And, I whenever I hear that, I think back of, like, when I used to play soccer. I used to live in Chicago, I live in Austin, Texas now, and we used to sometimes play soccer during kind of the workday. Like, we
Hmm.
go spend an hour out on the field, and there was this one guy on the team that every so often he'd run over and just, like, touch his phone, and I was like, "What are you doing? What are you?" He's like, "Oh, I gotta be on Slack." It's like, so you're out here still playing, and you figured out a way to game the system,
Yeah,
and so everyone's happy, but what if it was just okay for you to be out here? How much more would you love your job? How much more engaged would you be? How much better would you feel that you were honest
right.
to your boss and to the employer?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And there's other tricks that people will do. If they have a smartwatch, that's a big one. They can still check emails and get messages that way. It is kind of cheating, if you will. And you're not going to have the full benefit of actually fully immersing into something. And I love that you did soccer. I'm also big, I used to play soccer in high school and did some as an adult on a co-ed team for many years until I, got too many injuries and said, "All right, I guess I can't do that anymore." But those team activities are great. Not only are you exercising, you're engaging in a mastery experience, and you have the social connections that you're building, which are also really helpful for us too. So I know there's people that they think they absolutely can't, but um, it's absolutely possible. And I'll go back to the research. There's research that shows, and this the study I'm thinking of, it was a efforts by some researchers at BCG, Boston Consulting Group, that over the course of um, over a year, maybe a couple of years, they made some interventions where they basically implemented one night a week off for each of the team members, and they rotated that around. And everyone was skeptical. Nobody liked it. They thought this won't work. Our clients will be unhappy. But then as the intervention went on, so these are people that are very, very skeptical that this cannot happen, right? Kind of like your friend with the soccer game. But at the end, almost everyone admitted, wow, I actually really like this and I want to continue doing it. And so I guess I would just keep on pushing those individuals to just try it. Just do a trial. Have a set endpoint. Say, I will do it until, I'll try it for the next 2 weeks. See how I feel. No cheating, just see if it's really the worst thing in the world. And hopefully they'll be pleasantly surprised that, oh, they didn't miss out on anything. And they felt more refreshed going back to work the next day or at the end of, the break time that they implemented for themselves. And I love that you all did that
Mhm.
during the workday too, because that is also, um, especially recently, there's some really great studies showing that exercise and even walking during the workday, even just little bursts of activity, also really helpful. So I try to do a lot of that because I do a lot of working from home, sitting at my computer because it's a lot of writing. So carving out in your to-do list things for you is also something that I would suggest. My to-do list has all work stuff, it did until I started doing this, all work tasks, but nothing for me. And so putting items on there, 30-minute walk, whatever, have a couple activities specifically for you during the workday on your to-do list that you can check off and feel like you accomplished, that on your list. That's really important too.
The workday doesn't have to be all about work. I'm just thinking back to this like really strong memory in my mind when I was working with a client and we were talking just about this topic, and we was just saying, just try it for a week. Just don't to cancel one meeting.
Mhm.
Just maybe try not to pick one day a week. Don't respond to emails after 5. And I got back a, you just don't know how it is.
Yeah.
And this is why actually I love that I still like I work internal, and I've worked internal. I worked like I've had many different jobs working for different organizations. I'm not just, a consultant, I'm not just a coach, I'm not just a business owner. And not just for my own experiences, but working with, hundreds upon hundreds of clients one on one, it is possible. And so it really does pay me to say, like, well, what if we just ask everyone, imagine if it was, what would you change?
Mhm.
And we've been talking a lot about the personal kind of like things that someone may be able to do for themselves personally. But there are also leaders listening to this that maybe are responsible for teams that may unknowingly be creating this type of work environment or stress.
Mhm.
And do you have any recommendations or just ideas for leaders that might be listening to this that want to create a more positive work environment for their teams?
Yeah. I mean, one thought that immediately comes to mind is, the best leaders are the ones that are empowering their followers and um, doing the things that they do best and delegating those things that others do better. I'm specifically thinking about some of my conversations with a man named Gabe. He appears in my book quite a bit because his story is just so fascinating. And he is a business owner, and he realized that the way he was leading, as a workaholic, as someone who felt like you had to always be going, realized he was just leading in this chaotic manner, and everything was a crisis, and everything required immediate attention. Constantly emailing people after hours, and what it was doing was stressing everyone out on his team. And I think he called himself the big fear machine, was exactly how he referred to himself. And so if you think about, is that a good leadership style? Well, absolutely not, right? So over time, he was able to um, recognize how his thoughts and behaviors were affecting everyone else negatively, started delegating more and focusing on what he was really good at, which was actually, strategic planning, big picture stuff. And that is all really what you want for a successful business, is to be forward thinking, not backward thinking, to be thoughtful, not in panic mode. And so I think that if you really self reflect on what is your management style, and are you inadvertently kind of creating this environment that, while you feel like everything's, is at a fast pace and you're accomplishing all these things, and so it's all great, is that actually best for your vision of where you want your company to be in 10 years? And are there things you can do to actually, you know, take a step back and be more strategic and be more planful, allowing everyone to step out of that crisis mode, because no one thinks best when they're constantly in a panic, right? So not only is it helping you, it's helping everyone around you, but it's helping your business.
They're great insights. I know a lot of leaders that care deeply about being a good leader. I'm a little biased because I get a lot of leaders that are looking to grow into uh, be a better leader overall. And so they end up taking on more work and working after extra hours to protect their team sometimes. Sometimes they actually have a really positive work environment with their team, but they feel like they're kind of falling on the sword and don't take these lessons to heart for themselves. And so, to anyone that's listening, if you have a work life that you don't feel is fulfilling and is draining you, then I think there's something to be said about questioning some of those beliefs and maybe start with reading Dr. Melissa Clark's book. So, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners who might be, thinking about the next steps in their career, or maybe in a job or owning a business where they don't really have the work life that they want, or maybe you're in a toxic environment with a leader? Those are a lot of different situations,
Mm.
but what might you share with them before we summarize and head out?
I mean, I think a lot of these things we've talked about um, could be helpful, and it's not. I guess one thing I will say is it's not a quick fix. It's not a one size fits all. And so I would say maybe the first step is do some self reflection about your life, how things are at work, what you want in terms of your future goals, and what you're doing now. Is that going to help you get there? Um, Reflect on your own relationship with work. So, another thing is, you know, taking stock of how often you check your smartphone in the evening, or think about work, or have a hard time detaching. How often is that affecting you? And if it's a lot, then I would say do some trial and error and see what works, see what doesn't work. Give it some time, okay, well, I'm going to try meditating every morning for the next week. See if that helps calm my stress a little bit. That doesn't work, maybe the next week try a mastery experience in the evening and make yourself, you know, actually follow through with what you say you're going to do. Um, Try setting those boundaries, communicating when you will and will not be online. If you're a leader, I think really think through what are your communication patterns and norms, and can these be tweaked? And making sure you're following through with those conversations, not being the one who breaks the what you've already established. So it's a lot of trial and error, and it's not a one size fits all. But don't lose hope, because there are so many different strategies you can try. I talk about a lot of them in my book. A lot of others, have some great suggestions too out there in the industry. So just keep at it. I think
Mhm.
as I get older, I realize just how short life is. And so, I'm going to focus on the things that mean the most to me
Yeah.
and still be really
And I
successful
know
too, because work is also really important to me. I'm
Mhm.
very passionate about my work, but I also want other things too.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that's been fired for not responding to an email. So,
Yeah, life will go on.
yeah. Okay, if our listeners wanna get a copy of your book or follow your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I would love to get to know your listeners. They could go to my website. It's Melissa spelled with an A, Clark.com. And my book, you can get that anywhere books are sold. So be sure to check it out and let me know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. I'm not sure Dr. Melissa Clark. I just wanna say the full name, Dr. Melissa Clark, and your insight, and I hope, if anything, that we've inspired someone but to reflect a little bit more on the life that they want for their work, or maybe a leader to reflect on how they wanna lead and hopefully improve the world of work. You've been part of the Live for Yourself revolution. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share with a friend and spread the good word. Until next time, keep on living for yourself.